Hi everyone, I'm Nicole. The book that I chose to do my report on is The Life of Audre Lorde. The name of the book is Zami, a new spelling of my name, and it's an autobiography of her life. Audre Lorde was an African-American lesbian, and she was an activist for human rights. So I'm going to go on to read my report. The introduction. Audre Lorde was an inspirational African-American lesbian woman who grew up in Harlem, New York City during the 19th century. She grew up feeling alienated from her family and left home at the age of 17. Audre was a writer, a feminist, a womanist, and a civil rights activist. Audre was an amazing poet and author to several essays and speeches about sexuality, racism, and human nature. As a child, she used reading as an escape, but then she fell in love with the writing, and that quickly took over. Audre Lorde was subjected to racism, discrimination, and she was raped on several different occasions. Her autobiography takes on a journey through her life growing up in New York as an African-American lesbian woman. Some of the quotes that I put in the paper. Her first one, "It is not our differences that divide us. It is our inability to recognize, accept, and celebrate those differences. When I dare to be powerful to use my strength in the service of my vision, then it becomes less and less important whether I am afraid." And the last one, "Your silence will not protect you." I just found those to be some pretty powerful quotes that I wanted to add into my paper. February 18th, 1934, in Harlem, New York City, New York, Audre Lorde was born to Caribbean immigrants Linda Gertrude Belmore Lorde and Frederick Byron Lorde. Audre was the youngest of three girls. Her oldest sisters were named Phyllis and Helen. Audre grew up during the Depression and often listened to her parents talk about the West Indies and how they wanted to go back home. She writes about feeling alienated from her family. I quoted her, "I have often wondered why the farthest out position always feels so right to me, why extremes, although difficult and sometimes painful to maintain, are always more comfortable than one plan running straight down a line in the unruffled middle." Audre saw her mother as a powerful woman. However, in that time the term powerful had a much different meaning. She felt like an outsider and that her mother did not like her. She always noticed something about her mother that was different from the other women, and that perhaps her mama was secretly gay. Audre was considered legally blind as she was terribly nearsighted. Linda taught Audre how to talk by age 4, and she later learned how to read and write from her mother and Mrs. Augusta, a children's librarian, at which point Audre fell in love with reading and writing and used it as an outlet for her emotions. Audre's mother tried to shelter her and her sisters from the racism and discrimination that they endured in the later 1930s. In the area of Harlem between Lenox and 8th Avenue on 125th Street was a shopping area in which black people were not allowed, not even to work. Thanks to Adam Clayton Powell Jr. in 1939, his attempts to allow black people to work in the shops on 125th Street were a success. Audre recalls being a little girl and having white people spit on her coat every time her mom simply wiped it off with paper she carried with her, explaining some people have no sense and spit into the wind no matter where they are, rather than allowing her children to realize it was because of the color of their skin. Audre's parents did not want their daughters feeling the harsh emotions of racism and discrimination, so they did everything they could to hide it from their girls. Audre said her mother's approach to the world was that if you can't change what is real, you must change how you perceive it. Audre discusses how her parents taught her and her sisters that if they worked hard and did what they were told, then they could have the whole world in the palm of their hands. Audre and her sisters often wondered why their storybooks always had stories about people different from them, as the pictures were of blonde, white girls living in beautiful houses with a yard and a tree and even a dog in some. The girls never found stories with girls like us with dark skin and living in apartments in the middle of Harlem. Audre goes on to talk about how she thought it was because her family was rich, but somehow as her mother never let on to the fact that they were poor. Her mother said she hated wearing gloves, even though in the dead winter months her hands would get so red and blotchy, nearly frostbitten fingers, that she always brushed off as how things were done at home. She later noticed how Mom waited for Dad to come home late at night, from either work or a meeting, at the table with a kerosene lamp reading in paper in an effort to save on the bill for electricity. Audre described the effects of the Depression on families, black families especially, as devastating and catastrophic. She saw her mother cry twice, one of which was in the dental clinic having teeth removed, and the other was the night before was the night her father came home late, highly intoxicated, and let her mom know he had to be friendly with a client, but it meant nothing. It was for work. Audre believed her mom sensed the Second World War coming and began hoarding sugar, coffee, and peanut butter, and that during the war, Mother would only take Audre out shopping as she could ride the bus for free and help with the bags. Linda had to carefully plan out the trip, trying to only use one bus and avoid the stores with the mean people that would subject her daughter to some kind of racial slur or something to that effect. There was a booth near the school Audre would attend, where white women gave free milk to black women with their children, and that her mother would not allow us as she did not want their charity and told her daughters it was bad milk. Audre started school at age 5 and was still considerably blind. She started off at a public school across the street from her sister's school, which did not have kindergarten, much less one for a blind black child. After that school proved to lack in its ability to help her child, Linda took Audre across to the Catholic school. Audre described that time in school as degrading because there was so much racism, even amongst the nuns, so much so that she says, "The brownies were never called up to the front of the room. We had to read in anonymity from our double seats where we scrunched over the edges, ordinarily to leave in the middle for our 2 guardian angels to sit." Audre had a black friend named Alvin, and they worked together and wanted to show the brownies were just as smart as the white children. Audre and her sisters experienced hostile racism at their Catholic school, but later in high school she found a sisterhood of girls who wrote poetry and came across as rebellious. Audre Lorde wrote her first poem at age 12 while she was in 8th grade. Audre was able to have a poem published in 17 magazine while she was still in high school. She loved to write, and in a rebellious manner towards her parents and their rules, the nuns, school, and negative experiences she encountered. She used her writing as an outlet for her emotions in a way that enabled the readers to envision themselves in her shoes, feeling what she felt at different periods in her life. While in high school, Lorde made a new friend named Jenny with whom she grew extremely close with. Jenny and Audre became inseparable and spent a lot of their time experimenting with one another in an intimate manner. Jenny had a home life that was very intolerable, and that her father was really abusive and an alcoholic, which had traumatic effects on Jenny, so much so that she soon went on to commit suicide. Audre suffered emotionally pretty intensely, and her parents were not very sympathetic. Rather, they were very negative about the whole situation. Audre decided it was time to support herself and move out of her parents' home. She began working a vast array of odd jobs, such as a factory worker and several positions throughout the medical field. Audre graduated high school and went on to attend Hunter College. Audre spent a year in Mexico, where she attended university and discovered her real true self and was able to identify as a lesbian, accept that is who she was. She was a black lesbian poet, now on a mission to give a voice to others that are the same as her. She wanted to bring awareness to social issues endured by so many. She focused on sexuality, racism, female empowerment, and a vast array of many others. While in Mexico, Audre found a new lover, Audre, a 48-year-old woman from Texas, and the first woman to attend the University of Texas. Audre was fascinated by Audre, and they would sit up for hours talking and eating and really getting to know each other. They quickly became lovers and continued until it was time for Audre to get back to New York City. Audre went back to New York and received her master's degree in library science from Columbia University. After her relationship with Audre, Audre and Muriel had a relationship, and some of their friends did not accept them as lesbian relationships were seen as bad and frowned upon at that time. Audre Lorde used her experiences in life as an African-American lesbian to create an empire of poems, essays, speeches, and more than 15 books. In 1968, she published her first volume of poems, The First Cities, followed by Cables to Rage in 1972, and in 1974, New York Headshot and Museum was published. Audre Lorde was an activist and a feminist, and she was passionate in everything she stood for. She went on to achieve a National Book Award for her book, A Burst of Light, in 1988. Lorde lost a battle that lasted over a decade to breast cancer, which took her life on November 17th in 1992 in St. Croix, where she had been living. She wrote on her struggle and documented all that she endured on her journey with cancer. Audre Lorde was an amazing, inspirational woman that used the entire negative as motivation to create a voice for others that were much like herself. From feeling alienated from her family to trying to survive the cold winter months in New York City, Audre has shown that determination and believing in yourself can help individuals achieve all they desire. She used her words to fight her personal and political battles through poems. She did not conform to what society wanted her to, rather owned who she was and took pride in it. Thank you. I hope that you enjoy. Have a great day.